Hello, internets! This is Adam Brinckerhoff coming to you from my home office in Broomfield, Colorado, but Troy Dunn is at the headquarters of SpaceUnited in Arvada, Colorado. So when you put our powers combined, like Captain Planet, we can make a space agency. Troy, what's up?
What's up, everybody?
That was good. A question answering a question. Very Socratic. I like it. All right, today we are going to talk about our topic of the day. As we do every week, today's topic of the day is how to get help from robots. And in typical SpaceUnited fashion, we're going to talk about that with relation to space exploration as well as in the context of humanitarian work and medical help and all sorts of different ways that robots can help. So let's jump right into it. We have four robots or types of robots to talk about, and then we'll get to a robot expert, our friend Chris Nye, a little bit later in the program. But first, we're going to talk about it as if we know what we're talking about, as we always do. So let's talk about Robonaut II. You see him in the picture here if you're watching on the video. He's pumping some iron, and he looks like he has an Iron Man mask on, which is pretty sweet. Troy, tell us about Robonaut II.
Yeah, so Robonaut II is a humanoid robotic that was developed by the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas, and it is currently on board the International Space Station. You can see on Johnson's website here all kinds of information about the robot, but essentially, the robot was built to do a lot of tasks that might be too dangerous for a human to do, and we're still early on in the development of robotics, and Robonaut 2 was the second iteration of NASA's program to develop a robot that can act essentially kind of like a human, and it's got arms that move around and opposable thumbs and fingers but the goal is ultimately to take away some of the dangerous tasks that humans might be asked to do, and to have a robot do it. So that's Robonaut 2, and as I said, he's up on the International Space Station right now, I believe, and helping out doing some work up there with the astronauts and cosmonauts aboard the space station.
Very cool. All right, next up we have Big Dog. Big Dog was in the news a little while ago, so you might have heard about him. But he's developed by Boston Dynamics, and they do a lot of great work with robots. He's been applied to a lot of different situations, and most notably, recently, he has been in the military field. So some think of him as a robotic mule or donkey, basically like a pack mule or a load-carrying animal, but he's a very advanced robot in the sense that he can walk in all sorts of different terrain. You see the slides going by on their website of him in all sorts of different snow and sand and mountain terrain. I've also seen video of people walking up and pushing him and basically showing how he can adapt to changes in his center of gravity and just a general rough and tough environment. So he can carry big loads, and he can go all over for long distances between charges. And so the idea is, again, like Robonaut on the Earth situation, for him to be able to do a lot of the work that animals would typically do or humans would do, carrying, for instance, big military packs across long distances to help out with that kind of stuff. And also just some of the more dangerous things as well, or just the more physically taxing things. You can see here, similar to Robonaut being humanoid, Big Dog is obviously a very animal-like robot, and that is a part of robotics that is becoming more common. I'm not entirely sure the exact term. I think it's something along the lines of biorobotics, where you're mimicking animals with the way that the robots are built and the way that they act and react to different circumstances. So you can see his legs are very animal-like in his general shape as well. So we'll get a little bit more into that later on. But next up, we have our good friend Curiosity. You might know him as a Mars rover, and Troy is going to tell us a little bit about what he's been up to since he landed on Mars.
Yeah, so he actually we just celebrated an anniversary for Curiosity. You can see on their website they've got him in a birthday hat. But he's been on Mars now for 2 years and has been doing a lot of great work over there. Curiosity, for those that don't know, is the car-sized robotic rover that's currently exploring the Gale crater on Mars. And he's a nuclear-powered robot. He actually uses kind of the same power systems that Viking 1 and Viking 2 used, unlike the other two rovers, which are still, well, at least one of them is still trolling around on the planet, which is Spirit and Opportunity. But Curiosity's goals generally were to investigate the Martian climate and geology, and it's got laser in its eye there, you can see on the website, and it's been able to shoot that into some rocks to try to figure out the chemical compositions of those rocks, and, as well as a lot of other fancy scientific tools on board, including some drills. And so far, so good. Everything with Curiosity has been on kind of a long drive for the last few weeks. The last time I checked in, but every once in a while he makes a stop at an object, and we'll investigate it further to see what's going on. But again, it's another example of a robot that's doing work that would be difficult for a human to do with our current technology and available funding in space right now. And so we send a lot of robots to do the work that is dangerous and expensive for us to do. Using robots also lowers the cost of space exploration because you don't have to send along things like food and water. But there's also definitely some drawbacks to using robots as well, but we can get into some of that later. But just another one of the robots that's out there. And then our fourth robot that we wanted to talk about today is Dash. Adam?
Well, first of all, I always learned from TV and movies that robots just eat like metal cans. So don't they have to bring up metal cans with them to feed the robots?
No, this one, Curiosity, they don't. As I said, he's nuclear powered.
So he's not aluminum can powered, like all the robots of my childhood?
No, I assume the Robonaut II is, though, for sure.
Oh, that makes sense. All right, yeah. So Dash. Full disclosure, Dash was co-founded by a friend of mine from growing up in Illinois. So this is not just a shameless plug. Dash is doing some really cool stuff. But one of the reasons I wanted to put them up here today and talk about them was many of you guys out there, unless you're independently uber wealthy, probably can't afford a Robonaut or a Big Dog or a Mars rover, but you can very much afford a Dash. And as you can see, a Dash is a very small robot, but it can do a lot of really cool things. So the idea for the company came out of some graduate research that my friend Nick Kohut and some of his grad colleagues in Berkeley developed. So it's all about two things. First of all, basically making robots that do activities similar to bugs. So again, it's the bio-animal inspired, as you can see. Also, they take advantage of something called origami robots, which is basically the idea of a build-it-your-own kit that can be packed down very light and very small, basically using a number of the different pieces that you can see someone putting together there on the website. So it's very much a DIY thing, but it's very success. They had a really great crowdfunding campaign a few months back, and now they're shipping out their first order of, but they will continue to grow and develop new sizes and scales of these robots. And so it's a great way for you to learn about the cutting edge of robotics at home and to be able to get your own hands on the technology so that you can really learn in a way that you can't any other way, basically. And now we're going to move on to give a quick shout out to our sponsors. So SpaceUnited, Hangouts, podcasts, and the organization in general is brought to us, or brought to you rather, by our very awesome sponsors. First of all, those sponsors are you. So just because we have these cool companies up here doesn't mean that we don't appreciate you. Each and every one of our individual public donors, so we appreciate either through crowdfunding or just through our website, and those donations are all tax deductible, and we will thank you with a little gift in the mail, as well as our undying forever gratefulness. But in addition, we have some great companies that have come on board and helped us out in various ways. AGI does some great software for use in developing spacecraft and space missions, as well as land, sea, and air. They're used throughout the industry in aerospace, as well as in the educational field as well, primarily with their tool, Satellite Toolkit, or SDK, as you may have heard of it, referred to. Digital Globe is the world's leader in satellite imagery production. They have a handful of satellites up in the sky right now, and they have Worldview 3, their latest bird, going up, I think, tomorrow, Thursday, any day now, depending on the launch window and the weather and everything else that you have to think about when you're launching a satellite. But they're excited to get that up, and that will actually be taking imagery with 32 centimeters of resolution, which is pretty amazing stuff. So we love working with them, and specifically on our imagery mission, which you are welcome to check out on our website. It's called Image Griffin. So the Space Foundation, we actually just came back from a day down there in Colorado Springs at their headquarters. They have a great space museum and a program going on called Summer of Discovery that we participated in this past Saturday, and we will again this upcoming Saturday. So come by and visit our booth there if you're in the area. And finally, Uwingu does a lot of work with supporting space research and other scientific research through fundraising done by naming different exoplanets and Mars craters. So check out their website. You can name either or both of those, a variety of pricing points and funding levels that you can participate in, and that naming list or that map of names will be used in the future as different organizations continue to explore Mars and the planets out there beyond our solar system. So with that, we're going to turn it over to our guest, and he's going to tell us a little bit about what's really going on in the world of robotics. His name is Christopher Nie. He's a current aerospace engineering grad student at CU Boulder, or the University of Colorado, if you're not familiar with the Colorado area. He's a former Robonaut intern. He just got back from Johnson Space Center in Houston, which, as many of you know, is a NASA center. And we're happy to have him on the program again. Chris, welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. So let's jump right in. What, out of all the different things that you've worked on and heard about, what's your favorite robot right now that's doing work either in the space field or the humanitarian field, or both?
Well, I have to be a little bit biased here and say that Robonaut is my favorite robot. I've been around the program. It's a great program, and probably the reason why it's my favorite robot is because there's been so many spin-offs from it. NASA does a great job about publishing their technology and doing basically what's called the technology transfer to the commercial industry. So Robonaut program has been going pretty strong for 20 years now, and we're on Robonaut II doing some upgrades on it right now, the one that we have on station, and then we have a couple spin-off technologies, and we even had a team compete in the DARPA robotics competition with a different robot that we built called Valkyrie.
So which of the spin-offs or parts of the program did you work on this past summer?
So this past summer I was on part of the project that was developing a shoe to measure the amount of weight that you would lift while you work out say, doing squat or calf raises. There's a squat machine currently on space station that the astronauts use to do a lot of weightlifting. I think you can bench press on it too. They do it a lot more for leg workouts, but there's some issues with the way that they're measuring the force that the astronauts are lifting right now, and the branch of Johnson Space Center that kind of measures the workouts for the astronauts is looking for an alternative way to record the workouts from the astronauts in hopes of getting data and improving the workouts so that they lose less muscle and lose less bone mass. And one of the alternative ways that they're looking into is developing a shoe. So essentially we're modifying a weightlifting shoe, like any brand weightlifting shoe, and putting in some load cells into it so you can measure the moments and the forces when you're lifting a weight.
So for our guests or our viewers, rather, that have not been to space, can you tell us a little bit about what is different about lifting weights in free fall or on board the ISS versus doing so down here on Earth?
Yeah, so when you're in microgravity, there's no force pulling down like we have even when we walk, and since you don't have that constant force on your body in space when you're in the space station, you need to work out with systems like they started originally with like the Pilates bands, resistance training, and a lot of using like a ergometer, a exercise bike, and they found that resistance training is really great conditioning, but you need impact exercises, so high weight, low reps to save on how much bone mass you lose, and they developed a system to do that using vacuum chambers. So instead of lifting weights off the ground, you're basically pushing against a vacuum in a chamber, just like it's just a hydraulic system essentially.
Gotcha. So when you were working there, did you guys talk about uses for the shoe here on Earth, or has the technology gone in that direction?
Yeah, so we as a team see this as a large benefit for professional weightlifters or people that would like to monitor their workouts, because not only will you be able to, because you know how much weight you're lifting, because the weights are labeled obviously, but you'll be able to tell with these shoes if you're lifting more with your left foot or your right foot, if you're lifting more with your heel or your toe, and it'll be able to help people who are trying to up their competition stats just a little bit more. But technology like this is the beginning of what you kind of see Nike and Adidas and other running companies doing with pressure pads and where you're placing your feet to help you run better. Technology like this is basically the beginning of getting high fidelity data for that, because right now what they have is very basic with pressure pads.
Gotcha. Yeah, I was thinking of that as well. My wife being a runner, I am not, and we won't get into the reasons for that. But the other thought I had just off the top of my head, and I mean, if this is crazy, you can tell me, be honest, but has there been some consideration for the technology in the world of prosthetics? So, for instance, to help a person that either was born without a leg or had a leg amputated, to help them to learn to walk by using the data to, similar to a runner who wants to improve their stride or improve their foot placement, but to use it for an amputee?
No, that's exactly right. It's not crazy at all. We have, so the Robonaut II doesn't have walking legs because it's a space station program. So it is, on a side note, getting legs, but they'll have, those are going to be installed in the next month or two. So for anyone listening, keep an eye out for some Robonaut stuff going up on station. The legs went up in April, and they'll be installed by astronauts in the next month. But then we'll be able to walk around the station. But we don't use feet. We use clamps, so it grabs onto the handrails that the astronauts use to move around inside station, and they're everywhere. But we did build another robot in the team that had walking legs. That was kind of technology progression from we have a lower body exoskeleton, and that lower body exoskeleton and the robot with walking legs both used these pressure pads that we're talking about. It's basically like a pad with a lot of resistors, and you can tell where pressure is being applied by the change in resistance of the resistors in the pad, and that's okay, but a lot higher fidelity data for one, helping when you have a trainer tell you where you're applying your force for someone who's trying to learn how to walk again, or with a prosthetic, for instance, but also helping on the automation side, so you can develop a prosthetic that walks for you. And with this data can correct when you can't feel what's going on past your knee or past your hip.
That's fascinating. Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing about that. Troy, do you have a question you wanted to ask Chris?
Yeah, I definitely did. What kind of work is Robonaut currently doing on the space station?
So, as of this exact moment, he's undergoing surgery.
Okay.
But the kind of work that he's been doing, he will be doing once he gets legs, is, so we did a lot of checkouts early on with task board development. So can we flip these switches reliably? Do we know which ones we're switching? Do we know when we're flipping them? Can we read the data that's coming out from the gauges next to the switches? So that was kind of like how we made sure he was up to the standards that we wanted him to be. A lot of safety testing as well for space station payload. But the things that we're trying to be more progressive and more aggressive about doing is monitoring the air quality, water quality, and we're working towards trying to do some inventory for space station. So these are all tasks that take quite a bit of time for the astronauts to do because they're necessary. They're very, very necessary. But you know, they're not the most intensive tasks that you need a PhD, super smart astronaut to be doing. We kind of want to take over these tasks so the astronauts can spend more time on the payloads and the research that's happening on station. Once we get legs, we'll be able to have a little bit more freedom to do this, so we'll be able to walk around on our own in a stage that we're calling IVA mobility, for intravehicular mobility. And we'll be able to go up and monitor air quality and physically move things and unload, say, a Dragon capsule or something, and help out the astronauts with some of the more mundane housekeeping tasks.
Gotcha. So there's some people that don't know what it's like for an astronaut's daily life on the International Space Station, but essentially from the moment they wake up until the moment they go back to bed, they're busy doing something. They're going through a checklist to make sure some system is running, or they're maybe just checking in and writing down the results of an ongoing test that's taking place. And what you're saying is that you're hoping that Robonaut can take off some of the more mundane workload that they're doing to free them up to do things that really only a person can do there.
Exactly.
Great.
So just a quick question of clarification. Is Robonaut typically controlled from the ground in Houston, or is he controlled by the astronauts, or is it a mix of both?
Great question. We have the capability to do both. So Robonaut we have 3 what we call phases of control for him anywhere. It's basically autonomous, like a self-running script where he waits for a response and will react to it himself. We have semi-autonomous where there's checkpoints where we wait for Robonaut to hit, and then we'll allow it to progress along its script. And then we have a telerobotic form of operation where an operator will wear a heads-up display and a special type of glove, so the robot will follow the finger movements, the arm movements, and the head movements of the operator real time. and we've teleoperated using an astronaut on ISS to teleoperate Robonaut. We have the capability to do it from the ground, but there's about a 2-second lag time, so that's not the most popular option. But most of the operation of Robonaut is done from the operators on the ground in Houston.
Gotcha. All right. Well, that's really interesting. So, lastly, before we open it up to questions for our audience, this is kind of a two-part question. But where do you see the field of robotics going in the near future? But then also, on a personal note, like what are you most interested in them doing? Like, what if it were up to you, if you were in charge of the Robonaut program, or if you were in charge of any of the other programs that we were talking about? What would you want them to do in space and here on Earth?
Yeah, so...
yeah, I know. Break it down.
first part of the question was... Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. The first part is just where do you see the future of robotics going? So it seems like from a very casual, not involved observer, it seems like a lot more animal-type robots and humanoid robots. But you're more of an insider, so just generally speaking, whether it's space or Earth-based robots or humanitarian robots, like where in general do you see the technology moving in the near future?
Sure. I think the Robonaut program is maybe a little unique in that it's a humanoid. I don't know if we'll be seeing a lot of iRobot robots running around, just because, you know, it's a little bit harder to develop that type of system where humans are pretty complex. But that being said, I think human augmentation is probably going to be, robotics is a large field, and I think there's a lot of different directions it'll go. I think obviously autonomous cars will be the next big leap that the public will take. Some people say 2020. I would probably be conservative and say in the next 10 years we'll be seeing mainstream autonomous cars that are affordable, and that'll be like the next robot that'll really change how we live on a day-to-day basis. There's a lot of robots in the medical field that are already making worlds of change for surgery, but I think you'll see a lot more teleoperations. So you'll have in a third world country, you'll see a doctor in one centralized location with robots, like surgery robots that have 2 maybe hand manipulators performing ultrasounds. And this is something that's starting to happen already in India, but doing ultrasounds. But we've even tested Robonaut with things like a syringe, and he's very capable. So you'll start seeing a lot of telesurgeries with maybe just a nurse in the room, so you don't have to have a surgeon, and that'll really affect global health, I think, because it'll get a lot more, it'll fill a lot of the need for surgery. And then personally, I would probably be a fan of the prosthetics and the augmented strength robots. I think probably in the next 20 years we'll see an Iron Man-ish suit, maybe not with the bulletproof armor, but certainly with the augmented strength. I think the military has a heavy drive to do this, not necessarily for warfare, but for VA health, for veterans that come back with maybe a missing limb or problems with mobility. They certainly have a big vested interest in helping their veterans get back to full strength, and one of the ways to do that is using prosthetics that have some type of automated capability in augmented strength through the use of mechanical systems. And I think that's probably where we'll start seeing a big leap.
I would also, I think that there would be a similar applications in fields like disaster relief, like clearing debris and like search and rescue, as well as even just in like day-to-day construction type stuff.
You're exactly right. DARPA sponsored they're actually in the middle of a competition called the DARPA Robotics Challenge, where teams from across the world, from around the world, are developing a robot for just that, for disaster relief. And the idea spawned right after Fukushima, because there's some reports that say if a robot was able to go in and manipulate just a hand valve, it would have drastically reduced a lot of the damage that happened.
Interesting. So just out of curiosity, is that something that you want to pursue moving forward? You're entering, or you're a grad student this year? Are you entering your first year of grad school this year?
I'm in basically a joint bachelor's master's program, so this will be my second and third semesters of grad school, and I'll be finished and graduate in May.
Gotcha. So looking forward, are you going to continue to pursue the kind of intersection between robotics and aerospace, or was it just an interesting experience and you're going to keep looking for other options?
At the time, I'm in the process of trying to go full-time with the robotics group at Johnson. And if that doesn't work out, then I'll definitely pursue robotics as a hobby, or, I mean, it'll always be there because a lot of systems on spacecraft are robotic, so, you know, this, I think it'll always be around, and even if I go to some completely different field, it'll be a hobby of mine for sure.
Very cool. All right, well, we'll keep Chris here for a couple minutes while we kick it over to our questions for the day. As always, they are very similar questions to what we asked our guest, Chris. What is your favorite robot now, whether it's something that you had a chance to play around with yourself, or something that you've seen on YouTube, or whatever it may be? What can robots do in the future? Use your imagination. I mean, maybe realistically an extension of what you've already seen, or what you think they should do, and then that plays right into the third question. What do you want them to do? What do you think is the biggest priority for something that robots can do in the future, and maybe it'll spur on an idea for you or for one of our other audience members or listeners. So go ahead and post those answers. If you're watching online, we've already gotten a question with our Q&A button, so you can submit it that way, or you can tweet #SpaceUnited no matter when you're either watching or listening to this. We always like to field questions that way throughout the week, so go ahead and tweet #SpaceUnited with your question, and we'll get back to you. Or also with your answer. I always say question, but yeah, also we want to see your feedback on your answers for our questions. So we do have a question. I'm going to let Chris take it. It is from our friend Alex, and it says, or he says, with new mobility, is there hope to someday have Robonaut do an EVA?
It's a great question. Apologetic that I didn't mention it earlier. So I mentioned that we're entering the IVA, intravehicular activity phase of Robonaut II on station, and that's the first phase was just the upper torso without the legs, which was the prior 2 years. And the phase after IVA mobility is planned to be EVA mobility. So once we kind of test out our legs inside station and go through some safety, we'll upgrade the upper torso. The legs are material compatible with vacuum and EVA, so those are pretty much ready to go outside. We just have to do some more radiation testing on them. But the upper body needs to be upgraded in a couple ways, both for radiation and for materials compatibility in a vacuum. But that's some current development of the team, and we're hoping to go EVA in the future of ISS, yeah.
All right, so I have to admit I'm not familiar with every single acronym out there, so would you tell me and the rest of our slightly confused audience what EVA stands for?
EVA is extravehicular activity, which means you're going outside of the spacecraft that you're in. It's typically used for human spaceflight. So EVA is when the astronauts go outside in their spacesuits and work on the outside of station. EVA.
Spacewalk.
Yeah, spacewalk, exactly. There's some preparation time and some cleanup time in every EVA to get the tools and put them away, and we feel that Robonaut would benefit the program by maybe doing a little bit of setup prior, so the astronauts have more time to do the physical manipulation of the tools and fixing of the station when spacewalks are necessary.
Gotcha. See, I'm envisioning him just reenacting the movie Gravity, but
Yeah.
what do you want him to have? I guess that's not my decision. All right, Alex, thanks for your question. Troy, do you have any comments or answers that you'd like to throw out there on these questions? We're a little over time, but I want to hear from you. I know you've been silent for a little while. You're probably just itching to say something.
No, I just, Chris, it's great to have you on here today to answer these questions. It's awesome to talk to somebody that is, actually working in the field and on some of this tech. So just really appreciate you coming to answer some questions for us today. And, the thing I'm most excited about is also the prosthetics that can come out of this and some of those technologies to work in humanitarian and the idea of the teleworking in surgical situations and things like that is also pretty cool too. So thank you for sharing all of that with us today.
Yeah, I love talking about it. So thanks for having me.
Awesome. All right. Well, with that, then we will let Chris go on to the rest of his day and let all of you do the same. Thanks for tuning in. We'd like to again thank all of our sponsors, our guest Chris Nie, Troy Dunn, our executive director and co-host extraordinaire, and slide person, slide, runner. What would do you have a preferred title? Slide operator?
Slide runner. It's like Blade Runner, but with slides.
Yeah. I could see the Harrison Ford aspect.
Uh-huh.
Anywho, with all of that being said, we appreciate you all. Thanks for listening to the podcast, watching the podcast, however you participate. Please send us your feedback on the show as well as your answers to our questions and your questions for us to answer. Tweet us at #SpaceUnited, and we'll be in touch. Until then, have a great week and keep exploring for good. Bye, guys.